All right, folks. So that brings us to the third prong of the three-prong approach, and that is socio-emotional development. So here's the good news. Um, this is going to be pretty short. Um, there are two people that I want you to be familiar with regards to socio-emotional development over the course of the lifespan. And they are Harry Harlow and Mary Ainsworth. They are in your homework. So I'm not going to lecture on either one of them. There's some videos related to why they're important in human development, and you can do that in your homework. So the only person that we're going to focus on with regards to socio-emotional development is Erik Erikson and Erik Erikson's psychosocial stages of development. So let's go back to our little PowerPoint here. Okay, so at the heart of Erikson's psychosocial stages of development was what he called a psychosocial crisis. So Erikson believed that over the course of our lives, from birth to death, we go through 8 separate stages of development. And during each of those stages, there is a particular crisis that we all face. Now, usually when you hear the word crisis, you think of crisis as being a bad thing, right? And as you're probably learning in psychology, a lot of times in psychology, we don't use the same interpretations for words that normal people do. So what Erikson meant by the word crisis was more so like it's a task, it's a milestone, it's something that we need to accomplish. It's a challenge. Each stage has a challenge, and what impacts our social growth or our social stagnation is the way that we handle that challenge. So if we meet the challenge, if we overcome the milestone, if we achieve the task, then the outcome is going to be healthy social development. If we fail to meet the task, if we run away from the milestone, it doesn't really make sense, but you know what I'm saying, then we run the risk of getting stuck at that stage. So there's a positive resolution for each of these stages, but then there's a negative resolution. So as I said, there's 8 stages of development. First stage is trust versus mistrust, and the goal or the task or the crisis during the stage is to develop a sense of trust, and this corresponds with our stage of infancy. And I mean, this is pretty self-explanatory. There are some very basic things that have to go on in a baby's life to encourage a sense of trust. So if my basic needs are met and they're met adequately and in a decent time manner, so if I'm hungry and you feed me, and I'm tired and you hold me, and if I'm wet and you change me, my needs are going to be met, and I'm going to develop a sense of trust. If I'm hungry and you don't come in my crib to check on me because you'd rather hang out with your boyfriend and get high, or if you neglect me or my basic needs are not met, then that will develop a sense of mistrust. And you can imagine that forming a sense of mistrust the first year of life or couple years of life is really a very shaky foundation for the rest of your social development. So the second stage is autonomy versus shame and doubt. Coincides roughly with the toddler years. The goal of the stage, the crisis that we need to overcome, is developing a sense of autonomy. If you don't know what the word autonomy means, basically means independence. And if you know anything about a toddler, you would understand that gaining independence is a pretty big task, right? What are the 2 favorite words of a toddler? No and mine. And as frustrating as it might be to hear those words, they really indicate huge cognitive leaps in that toddler's ability. So the minute I say no, basically what I'm saying to you is like, here's the deal, dude. Like, I get it. You have a need, but I also have a need, and our needs don't match up. So my need supersedes yours. So no, I'm not doing what you want me to do. And mine, right? When I say mine, then I'm saying like, this belongs to me. This is like significant. Like, I'm not sharing what I want with you because I'm my own person. And as annoying as it is to have a baby that's constantly, or toddler that's constantly saying no and constantly going against what you want, what it's showing is that they're developing a sense of independence. We're developing a sense of trust. If as a parent you allow that, within measure and within reason and boundaries, then they'll develop a sense of trust, and they'll have a sense of independence in their abilities. If, however, you don't allow that, if you are super overprotective or you're very authoritarian and like my way or the highway, then that kid is really going to constantly question their own independence, question their own ability, and develop a sense of shame or doubt, which is not a good outcome. Third stage is initiative versus guilt. So initiative is kind of going out with that independence, with that autonomy that hopefully you developed in the previous stage, and kind of acting on it. So this is preschool years. These are like this is like the most active time that you've ever been in your life. You might think you're busy now as college students, but you're not busy at anything like you were when you were a preschooler. This is when kids really take the foundation that they have and they make a massive leap out into the real world. This is when we start making friends. This is when we start like actually interacting with others, playing with others, and kind of acting upon that sense of independence. If you were coddled, if you were taken, or if you were kind of overprotected in the previous stage, then you're probably going to feel really inhibited and not go out and kind of enjoy things. Fourth stage is industry versus inferiority, about the school age years. So like elementary school. Developing a sense of industry, you might not know what that means, but it means like being competent, meaning that you feel like you can accomplish things. And obviously, if we're talking about school, then a lot of this is related to, you know, the relationship between effort and output. You know, if you are a kid who, you know, you're naturally a B student and you struggle and you work really hard and the best that you can get is B's because that's where you are, and your parents kind of reward you for that and feel like the effort that you put in has an appropriate output, then you'll develop a sense of industry. If, however, you feel like you're putting a lot of time and effort and nobody's kind of giving you any credit for it, or if maybe the best that you can do is a B, and with all of your time and effort and your parents make you feel like crap because you aren't an A student, then you run the risk of developing a sense of inferiority during the stage. And you can imagine if during the elementary school years you have a sense of inferiority, you're questioning yourself, you don't feel competent as a student, then again, that would lay a really dangerous foundation for future development. Next stage is identity versus identity confusion. These are the adolescent years. Forming a sense of who you are is really crucial during this stage. Just a little bit of a side note, because I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. Erik Erikson was an interesting dude. If you think it's like a really weird name, it'll sound even weirder when you find out when it came from. So that wasn't his birth name. He actually gave himself, his name was Eric, first name, but he gave himself the last name of Erikson. He was a Jewish young man who grew up in a small German town. And he always said that he felt like really kind of out of place because he was very tall, had like bright blonde hair and blue eyes. So he said when he would hang out with all of his Jewish friends in temple, like it would feel really like awkward and uncomfortable because he looked really German. But when he hung out with his German friends where he lived, he always felt out of place because he was like the Jewish kid in the small village. So he always felt like he didn't really fit in. When he was later on in his life, he found out that the man that he thought was his biological father wasn't actually his biological father. The man who raised him wasn't actually his biological father. That, in fact, he was a man that had married his mother when he was very young, who actually had been his pediatrician. And that Erik Erikson's mother never knew who his actual biological father was. And this kind of threw him into an identity crisis because he grew up believing that he was somebody completely different than who he was. And so he felt like forming a sense of identity was really kind of crucial to not only to your understanding of self, but definitely your understanding of relationships with others, which brings us to our next stage, which is intimacy versus isolation. Early adulthood years. Forming intimate bonds is being able to be open and vulnerable with someone else and share with them and kind of reveal really close aspects of yourself. and that's important. It doesn't necessarily, I know you hear the word intimacy and you think oftentimes like romantic or sex. It doesn't have to be. It could be just having really close friends that you're comfortable just being yourself with. If you don't do that, then you run the risk of feeling kind of detached from people, not connected, and developing a sense of isolation. Next stage is generativity versus stagnation, middle adult years. So somewhere between like, well, I hate to say it, but late 30s to 50s or 40s to 60s, somewhere in there. By this time, especially we're talking, 50s and 60s, if you did form a sense of intimacy, so if you settle down, had kids, your kids are probably getting ready to leave the house, and you start thinking about the next generation. That's where generativity comes. Once we hit like 50s, 60s, we start realizing that we're facing our own mortality and that there's a generation coming up behind us that we need to give back to, need to kind of protect and look out for. If, however, we didn't form a sense of intimacy, if we feel kind of disjointed and disconnected, then we'll just kind of feel this sense of stagnation, meaning like, I'm 60 years old, I realize that my life is more than halfway done and I'm just kind of stuck. I'm just going to kind of wait it out because this was all kind of pointless. And then the last stage, which coincides with our late adulthood years, so like 60s to 90s or hundreds, I guess, is integrity versus isolation. No, that shouldn't say isolation. It should say integrity versus despair. Why does it say isolation? Oops. That just disappeared on me. Okay, let's try that again. Yeah, okay. Well, here, I'm gonna change it. SPAI. Integrity versus despair. From current slide. Okay. There we go. So integrity, last years of our lives, we're able to look back, we're able to feel like our life was really worth it, that we had meaning, there was significance behind it. We can kind of have the sense of wisdom and knowledge that our life meant something. Despair, obviously you guys know what despair means. If you didn't feel a sense of trust, if you felt shameful and doubtful and questioned and inferior, and you were confused and you were isolated and stagnated, yeah, you probably will get to the end of your life like, what was the point of all that? Like, just let me die, just get this crap over with. Okay, so that was Erikson's psychosocial stages of development. As I said, the other two things that I do want you guys to be familiar with are Harlow and Harlow's contact comfort, and Mary Ainsworth's strained situation. That's all from your homework. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please let me know. If not, we are done with our chapter on human development. All right, guys. Have a good night, and our next lecture is going to be on, what do we do after human development? Ooh, personality. It means we're going to be talking about Freud in even more detail. Things are about to get weird and funky. Okay, signing off. See you guys. Oops. Well, wait, that slide's in there. I'm not going to talk about Harlow and Ainsworth, but that's in the slides. Oh, I forgot that was in there. There's the basic information that you need. I'm not going to lecture on it because you're doing it homework-wise. It's in the PowerPoint anyway. So, okay, done.